employment became a hurricane, I tell you, of gross violations of human rights law. Now, the question is, what of the victims, and how do these individuals get the much deserved representation and justice for the atrocities, if you will, that took place? Of course, the issue of migrant domestic workers has been one of our most requested topics on this show. We want to thank you so much for the feedback that you've been giving us, as well as the requests. Interestingly enough, May is about the woman, okay, and her wellness. And so we actually started looking at the labor issues affecting women. Listen to this, and this is a report by the NGO that we are featuring today on the show. 151,687 women are domestic workers in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. How many more are there? Well, we want to welcome, by the way, our guest to the show. She is a human rights expert from the Global Justice Group, who are so passionate about this and are here to say, by the way, you should be caring about this too. Please welcome to the show, Stephanie Mbogo. Karibu sana.
Thank you, Chico. How are you?
I'm good, I'm good. Did I do justice to that intro?
Yes, you did, absolutely.
I'm loving the outfit. We did not discuss this, but we're both in black and white.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here today. Happy that we match as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much as well. So first of all, let's just get a context of what your NGO does. When we hear of Global Justice Group, what really is your mandate?
Okay, so thank you for having me today. Global Justice Group is an NGO that focuses on supporting victims of international crimes to access justice. And justice, you know, is a very broad-based kind of engagement and talk, but we're looking at terms of reparations, right to remedy. We are looking at compensation. So we have victims of genocide, we have victims of terrorism. And right now in Kenya, the program focuses on victims of human trafficking and modern slavery, particularly the Kenyans who were, you know, migrated to Saudi Arabia, which when you assess the form of migration, we have realized is trafficking, and they migrated to Saudi Arabia. You know, I'll explain that a bit as we go, but they migrated to Saudi Arabia to work as domestic workers, and they end up in situations that can only be appropriately described as modern slavery.
Right.
And many of these people, because they have been violated not only in their country, but in a foreign country as well, it becomes very difficult for them to identify the jurisdiction or the area in which they can begin to seek justice, because the people who exploited them may have been in Kenya, they're in Saudi Arabia.
True.
How do you go after them? Perhaps it's the employers in Saudi Arabia who exploited them. How do you go after them? Or how do you go after the people who pretty much benefit from your exploitation? Because at the end of the day, a crime serves to gain, you know, to make profit for the perpetrators of that crime. If a crime wasn't profitable, then there wouldn't be a crime. So that is pretty much what we're doing currently in Kenya. So we are documenting the cases of these women. As you've said, there are a number. Those are actually official statistics that were released by the CS for the Labor and Social Protection in August last year.
Right, yeah, I did see that,
Yes, so you can imagine how many more who have not been identified are there. And those are the ones currently in Saudi Arabia. So when you look at the numbers of those who have come back, you look at the numbers of those who are, you know, Kemboys. Kemboys is what they refer to them as, the runaways. Those who are not within the official government system, the numbers are so much more.
Wow.
And looking at the number of people who have come back injured psychologically, physically, is in the thousands.
True, or in a box.
Thank you. Just last week, we actually helped to bring back somebody. We, you know, the family laid her to rest yesterday, and she died under unclear circumstances. So an independent post-mortem was conducted, and, you know, it's the same story over and over again. And the reason we're really passionate about this discussion right now is because Kenya has taken, I don't like the word, labor export policy, and pushing for Kenyans to work abroad. We have very many jobs that have opened up in Saudi Arabia for Kenyans. About 350,000. The number of skilled workers, and you know, skilled is a very relative term, but the number of people who will be migrating as domestic workers is crazy. And it's not a good situation. There's something that needs to be done to hold people to account.
Yeah.
And when you hold the perpetrators to account, then only can you be able to ensure that there are better working mechanisms. Only then can you be able to ensure that not only are there better working mechanisms, but the people who will be going thereafter are protected.
Correct.
Because at the end of the day, we need to earn.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing.
I think that's really what gives this discussion a lot of, meat to it. The fact that now we have these floodgates that are open for Kenyans to just move in droves. And, you look at the brain drain that's happening in this country. You ask yourself, okay, can those skill sets be better used at home, especially with the kind of risks that are out there? But Stephanie, let me just ask, how did you manage to zero in on Saudi as opposed to generically the Arab world? I mean, what are we now starting to understand about this country?
Okay, why Saudi Arabia is because it sits as the superpower of the Gulf states.
Okay.
And why I call it a superpower is because they have the largest economy. And should there be reforms in the state of Saudi or in the kingdom of Saudi, the other Gulf countries will follow suit. But not only that, the number of Kenyans in Saudi Arabia is so much more than those in Qatar, in Dubai, in Oman. Yes, the exploitation and the abuses match, the terms of trafficking match, but the numbers, when you have a large number of people who are advocating for the same thing, it's easier for the smaller countries or those who have fewer people to replicate the same model that has been taken up by where this works for a much larger nation with a much larger population, yes. But also strategically, Saudi Arabia, we know the oil reserves are depleting and they're looking to get into the global economy. So that becomes a very strategic angle for us to begin to negotiate for better human rights protection.
Correct.
Also, they are looking to host the 2030 World Cup. That becomes a very strategic negotiating platform. You look at what happened to Qatar before they hosted the 2022 World Cup and after they hosted the World Cup. So there's a lot of human rights abuses before, but all these different people came and shed light on what was going on, and there have been immense reforms. So that is why we're strategically looking at Saudi Arabia.
Wow, interesting point there. I just learned something new. You had talked about there has to be some profit that is being made. And I want us to really focus on that, because I think this is a unique aspect about the crimes or the human rights violations. If you could paint a picture for us about the kind of economy that's moving around this human trafficking being disguised as domestic workers, what have you learned?
And maybe if I can just point to the remittances to begin with. So the diaspora remittances from Saudi Arabia are the second highest to Kenya.
Oh, no way.
Yes.
What?
They've overtaken the UK, they have overtaken Australia and the likes. And then beyond that, the labor remittances from Saudi Arabia are the highest in the country. They'll be looking at billions of Kenya shillings. Billions. And this is just within 8 months. CBK produced a report late last year, looking at an 8-month analysis. That's a lot of money that is coming from remittances. So this is domestic workers breaking their back. This is money that they're sending in home.
Jeez,
the population that are not domestic workers, they're in construction or are drivers and the likes, that's about 50, 60,000 as per the official statistics. So we're looking at a lot of this money is coming from domestic workers.
Right.
That's a lot of money coming into the country. Remember, all money that's coming into the country is being taxed.
Correct.
So that is money that the government is making.
Yeah.
But beyond that, there's salient amounts that people don't get to hear about every day, but they are there. And that is why we're talking about modern slavery and human trafficking.
Right.
So the employer in Saudi Arabia, who is popularly referred to as a kafil, a kafil will pay a certain amount of money, which we have estimated is about 500,000 to 700,000 shillings.
Okay, just to acquire the worker.
To acquire one worker.
Okay, wow.
One domestic worker. So this money will be divided between a Kenyan agent and a Saudi agent, as well as foot the costs for their ticket, their visa, their medical costs.
Right.
Remember, the reason why there are so many Kenyans going to Saudi Arabia is because there's zero commission fees. There's no agency fees that you have to pay. So the agent will tell you, come as you are. Do you have a birth certificate? Don't worry, I'll procure one for you.
Oh.
Do you have a passport? No, you don't. I'll procure one for you.
They make the process so
it's
seamless.
so seamless.
Yeah.
You get into it and, you know, they just carry you along.
Yeah.
You're literally just, they sort everything for you. And you look at how that money is split. The agents make a good profit margin per person, anywhere between $2,000 to $3,000.
Yeah,
that
is crazy.
That's
money.
200,000, 250,000 thereabout.
Right.
That's a lot of money to make per person. But beyond that, the agencies also pay a bond to the government of about 60,000 Kenya shillings per domestic worker. So between the two of us, a bond of 120,000 would be paid to the government. We have 151,000 Kenyans, domestic workers in Saudi Arabia, just Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Where is that money going? What purpose does that money serve? Because I'm sure you've seen online on Facebook, on Instagram, plights of people saying, help me raise money for a ticket. Help
because I'm stranded.
Because I'm stranded.
Right.
When they want to leave, the employer tells them, the kafil tells them, no, you cannot leave unless you pay me the 600,000 or the 500,000 that I used to buy you. That's the term
so
that they
now
use.
this has become a situation of an ROI, return on investment.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, and so they own you.
Yeah.
So that begins to just paint a picture of the amount of money that is moving in this space. If you're looking at just in Kenya, an investment or, you know, a profit of 200,000 per person, you know, that's a ballpark figure. Multiply that by the number of people in Saudi Arabia, in Qatar,
and here we hear even government officials even have these agencies. Now you understand why.
And, you know, it becomes a bit difficult to begin to investigate into it. But also, you know, when we're looking at the advocacy angle of it, what is the buy-in for everybody? Why should, because the agents, yes, they'll be there because they support to help securing these job opportunities. But what is the buy-in for every single actor in this? As agents, what is your role? As a National Employment Authority, what is your role in curtailing this? It needs a very multi-stakeholder kind of approach to be able to address this economy, because it's a whole economy.
It is.
That is thriving.
Correct.
And, you know, when you look at the contribution to the Saudi economy, you know, just talking about the Kenyan economy, these domestic workers contribute so much to the economy, so much to the extent that in Philippines, because of the number of workers who had been abused and exploited, there was a ban on all Filipinos in Saudi Arabia. So the government sent planes, got the people, took them back to the Philippines. That's about a workforce of maybe 1 million people. And the Philippines negotiated for their domestic workers and their different workers and said, you know, for us to be able to send our people back to Saudi Arabia to work in your country, we need you to pay a compensation of $582 million.
Wow.
Which the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia is paying. For them to agree to pay such an amount as compensation can only begin to hint at the level of importance that these domestic workers have to their economy.
Right. And it almost feels like we're just getting, and I'm sorry to use this word, excuse my French, but the S side of the stick. You know, because to be honest, why would you shortchange your own people when other countries or other nations are negotiating so much better for their own people? So I mean, it doesn't mean that they're coming to do any less work or they're lesser people. So
absolutely,
it makes you wonder why we wouldn't do that as a country. But, you know, I like the report that I read from you. In fact, I was quite impressed about, you know, how it was, the whole compilation of it. And I want to get your opinion on the government, okay, and this whole justice system, and perhaps if you feel that they have completely failed to provide survivors with proper representation over their claims. How do you feel about this?
Currently, only one matter of a former domestic worker who was in Saudi Arabia is before the courts of Kenya.
Only one? And
it's currently ongoing. Only one.
Only one. No
The
way.
Number of people who have come back in caskets.
Yes.
The number of people who are injured, physically, permanently injured.
Right.
The number of people who are psychologically injured is crazy. But there's only one matter before the courts, which then speaks to the technicalities and bureaucracies that are there. Remember, this is somebody who has left Kenya to go on 25,000 shillings, 30,000 shillings a month at best, right? So when they come back into the country and they're in this state where they have not received any finances or they are sick, the family is thinking that the first immediate kind of support we can give is let's get them better. Let's take them to hospital. Remember, psychology, what do you call it? Mental health issues are not that appreciated in our country. So even getting them to go to consistent counseling towards their healing is a problem. Then we're looking at even filing a matter before the court. For many people who are very well read, can't just approach the court. You need to go through a lawyer.
Of course.
Which lawyer is going to take your matter pro bono and be like, oh, okay, let me take your matter, you know.
How
and
many
who are you going to take the matter against? Probably the people who sexually abused you, physically abused you, are in Saudi Arabia. But what we're doing is, based on this evidence, we're trying to identify who is liable. What documentation can create a line of liability? Because it's something that's not been done in this country. Even domestic workers who have been abused within Kenya, how many have you had have gone to court to receive justice? Or have even gone to Kudeha, which is the domestic one of the unions that supports domestic workers? How many have gotten their issues resolved? Very few. If you look at the ratio, yes, you may have maybe cases of 100, but you look at the ratio, that's a drop in the ocean.
Absolutely.
You know, so we're trying to see how can we engage with different people in the judiciary, in the parliament, right? Even in the executive, to see how it's going to be a multi-stakeholder approach towards helping them to get justice, to access justice, because it cannot be approached from one angle alone.
And I mean, there's only so much you can do as this NGO, but I can see baby steps already taking place. So how is that going? Because you've talked about documentation first, but how is the process going? Are you seeing barriers, doors being shut in your face? How is that going? What's the experience like now?
So it's a very intensive progress, and you know, shout out to my team. And it's a very intensive progress, and you know, we work with Faith Murunga, who's a survivor from Saudi Arabia. I wish she was here today, but she had other commitments. And Faith is a survivor of human trafficking and modern slavery in Saudi Arabia. And Faith, when she came back to Kenya, she, you know, she learned how to agitate for her own justice without having the capacity or the equipment or the know-how. She was doing what she could. Faith was going to receive bodies at the airport. Faith was going with families to the State Department for Diaspora Affairs to try and identify people where they are, would attend postmortems, would, you know, lobby, share posts, whatever she could do in her capacity. And we got in touch with Faith, and through that, it's become like a snowballing kind of thing. First of all, the aspect of a right to remedy for human rights violations is almost unheard of, because who's willing to take my case? What do they want from me? How much money are they looking at? What do they benefit from it? Because there's been a cycle of abuse, you know? So it's a very slow process, very slow process, because also people are not very open to the aspect of civil litigation to start with. I don't want to go to court. I've gone through so much abuse. Let me just be at home.
And forget about it. Let me just try.
I don't want to be re-traumatized. So it's a very slow process, which we've been at it for about a year now. And we've identified a large number of people, documented about 150, and looking to scale up. But you know, before people actually buy into what access to justice is, understand that, you know, we don't want anything from you. We are actually here to support for you to access justice because you've been violated. And it's so bad because there are people who do not know that they've been abused.
I mean, they can't understand what it is.
Zero understanding of abuse. You know, you talk to them and you ask them, how was your stay during your tenure of employment? And they say, oh, haikuwa mbaya sana. Okay, so, you know, you try to dig a bit deeper, because when we are looking to institute a matter, we'll have to appropriately highlight every violation. So they say, kwa Mwarabu kuchapwa na kutukanwa ni kawaida. In an Arab's household,
so
being
they've
beaten
normalized
and
it,
being insulted is normal. So what's the difference? But you look back at also where they're coming from, also the statistics of people who are migrating to go to Saudi Arabia, because abuse doesn't just start there. It starts in Kenya. A large number of people who got children as early mother, early motherhood. And I'll talk of early, let me call it teenage pregnancies.
Yeah.
That is a defilement that was not addressed. And then they are shouldering the burden of these children by themselves.
Right.
They have to make ends meet.
That's the next solution.
Right? So even by the time they are going there, they're coming from a place of abuse that was not resolved.
Yeah.
To abuse that is still not resolved.
Yeah.
And it's a cycle of abuse that they are trapped in.
So this business of kuvumilia and nikawaida, normalizing things, has now become an issue, that another barrier that you have to help these women overcome in order for them to access this justice.
Absolutely.
Wow. Stephanie, we want to take a short commercial break right now, yeah? But I want to encourage our viewers this morning, tafadhali, to please text in, especially if you do know someone somewhere who's considering, by the way, becoming a domestic worker abroad. We're talking about the Arab world in general, but you can see the statistics and why Stephanie and of course the NGO have zeroed in on Saudi Arabia. We want you to throw in your questions and even your comments about what more can be done, because as we're talking about interventions, the key word here, by the way, is interventions, meaning recommendations. What more can we do to improve this? Remember, this is a timely conversation as well, because like we had said, there is now a very huge opportunity for individuals to go out and work there. So what are you up against as well, and what do you need to know? She's here as a human rights expert to answer some of your questions at K24 TV across those platforms, and we do have our WhatsApp number at the bottom of your screen. Let's take that short commercial break, and then we'll be back with more on interventions for migrant domestic workers.